and looking for any scholars who knew about how to implement revealed law, how to understand it, how to judge by it. Anyone who knew how to do that, they hunted them as if it was a witch hunt. One of those great scholars is our Sheikh, our Alim, Sheikh Muhammad Al-Khidr Al-Shinqiti. Wonderful Alim from Mauritania. They hunted this man like a beast. An absolute beast. Alhamdulillah, they never got him. But some ulama, wala hawla wala quwwata illa billah, had to shave their beards to hide. Some ulama went underground. One of our ulama, Abdul Ghani al-Nabulsi, one of the big Abdul Ghani, the great alim Abdul Ghani al-Lubadi. What was he doing at this time? One of our great ulama. He was busy fighting Zionist Jews that had come from Europe into his native Palestinian home. Fighting the British who had divided the Middle East into the British Mandate. So he's fighting French. He's fighting the French who are looking around for additional land after they've taken what they're now calling Lebanon, which is a fake country. It was all sham. So now there's a new people called Lebanese, and they don't like Syrians. Although they speak the same, right? They meet each other, Assalamu alaikum, Ishlonik, Ishkon, He, all the same verbiage and language, the same horrible jokes. Greasy food with lots of garlic. Same thing. They're the same people. Same dialect of Arabic. Palestinians, Lebanese, Syrians, same dialect of Arabic, same culture, same language, everything. But they're being told, no, you're Lebanese. You're Syrians. You're Palestinians. You're Jordanians. Jordanians. These are Palestinians. Hiding under the covers. Oh no, we're not Palestinians. Not those other guys that are living in the tents in the concentration camps. We're not Palestinians. We're Jordanians. Then how come you're related to those guys? Don't know. We're not Palestinians though. We're Jordanians. And they're quick to correct you on this point. Although they're Palestinians. So he's fighting 3-4 different peoples and being hunted by consolidation forces after the collapse of the Ottomans. One of the greatest ulama to have ever lived in the past 300 years. Sheikh Muhammad Zahid al-Kawthari, considered by many to be the mujaddid of his time, the great Hanafi alim, Sheikh al-Islam Muhammad Zahid al-Kawthari, had to hide like a polecat, had to escape and hide in Egypt. Why? Because they were looking to kill this man. In his day, in his heyday, he was in charge of distributing the zakah, carrying out the death penalty, judging in cases, all these different things. Anyone that had anything to do with the revealed law, in terms of practical application, kill that man. The intelligentsia wiped out. That was the plan. And the annihilation was huge. I told you 5,000 scholars in one day. That is a conservative estimate. After this, from the years 1338 to 1368, the French imperialism intensifies. There was the prohibition of alcohol in 1338 for fiscal purposes. This began in the US. The lack of alcohol pushed up a black market for alcohol consumption when people had no reason to stop their wayward consumption. The Chicago mob syndicates under the charismatic leadership of Alphonse Scarface Capone began to flourish. And so in this time, you had Irish people who were stereotypically police in Chicago against the underworld of Italians. And that undercurrent of Italian criminality being led in Chicago by the mob boss Alphonse Scarface Capone. And it created almost a racial environment in which there was this battle between the Italians, who were the mob, and the Irish, who were the police. And it took on this hue of racism at some times, to where if someone was Italian, he must be in the mafia. If someone was Irish, he must be a fireman or a cop. And this is how this stereotype developed. And they battled consistently. And it was incredible. For a book that deals with not just the Chicago mob, but New York mobs, It's written by recently freed mobster Michael Bonanno. And the book is about the Bonanno crime family. The Bonanno crime family was the actual crime family featured in the movie The Godfather. They just changed some of the names. But the Bonanno crime syndicate, it was the movie The Godfather was based upon them. And Michael Bonanno wrote a masterful book on the rise of his family from Sicilian peasantry to the highest echelons of the mafia. And it's a very riveting read. In the Ottoman lands, the Turks began to be exterminated, driven out of their lands towards Turkey. There was infighting that occurred between Turks, Armenians, Greeks, and Cypriots with the rise of a new disease, nationalism. The island of Cyprus was divided. You have Turkish Cypriots, Greek Cypriots, completely divided up. 1,500,000 Armenians die in clashes with Turks or with a new movement that had taken over since the demise of the Ottomans, the Young Turks. These were the new secular, sleek Turks. Took off the amama, just wearing the fez or maybe the Russian hat, mustache, because obviously no beard. And these people blended in and became the new face of the Turkish people. If you meet and examine the Turkish people today, they are a direct result of the Young Turk movement, and later another man, Mustafa Kemal, who changed his name to something more Turkish, Kemal Atatürk, father of the Turks. They are the direct result of them. And when you look at some of them, not all of them, obviously villages and hamlets and offlying towns and things, but when you look at a lot of the city people, one of my teachers said that it is his understanding after examination of their case that it's imperative to give people that are coming from Istanbul Ankara Shahada because they have no signs of Islam on them. But that's just one sheikh. But it's that serious. Their traces of Islam are that low. Now what you call people where he misses one or two prayers, he's not really practicing. These are people that they don't pray and they don't think it's an issue. There was a Muslim brother that came to our masjid in London fleeing from his parents because they were trying to force him to eat pork to come into the 20th century. Why do you have these superstitious beliefs? It never killed us. We've been eating it all these years. Well, because the young man wanted to learn more about Islam, cracked open the dusty Qur'an on the shelf and found out, whoa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbade pork. And he's also forbade alcohol and lewdness. And the young boy told us of his being tortured and beaten by his parents and fled to the masjid. And the parents, they didn't want to come to the masjid at first because they thought, well, this is a religious building where religious people are and extremists and people like that. We don't want to come in. And in talking with them at first, one of the attendants at the masjid told me, Abu Ja'far, there are two kuffar downstairs that say that their son is here. And so when I came downstairs, I met them. They had some name, Turkish names. I didn't even know they were Muslim until, in the course of a conversation, a Muslim brother that was Algerian was talking about them, and they heard the word kafir, which they recognize as Ghafir. And they thought, no, we're not kuffar. We're Muslims. And they're ready to fight with you, but they have no signs of Islam. And don't want signs of Islam. Not that they don't have signs of Islam and they're struggling. No, they don't want them. Because Turkey becomes this communist, super secularist state ruled by a democracy of military generals. And you have people in this country referring to Turkey as a bastion of democracy. There, they've been able to keep the Islamist radicals on the run by keeping democracy in full effect. Yes, by shutting down free press, people disappearing, being tortured, brothers being arrested. They come from Pakistan to visit a colleague there in Turkey. They get arrested at the airport for having peach fuzz. He's got a beard. He's under arrest. Praying in the airport, tackled him after Salah. Why? Because what are you doing? The airport's not for prayer. The airport's for people getting off of planes. What are you doing? That's how serious the matter had become. So the Young Turks came in and devastated what was left. The consolidation forces which were all the countries combined of their military units and their mercenaries, went on hunts to slaughter scholars, anyone who knew how to implement the revealed law. The Young Turks, a new secular mustache brand of secular thugs, attempted to drive Islam underground as they prepared to build a synthetic nation based on an almost blood purity myth. This myth was Turkishness. So you'll get people today, the myth of Turkishness. And this is where it's coming from. We are Turks, and these are, well, what about the Greeks? What about the Armenians? What about the Kurds? Well, they're Turks as well, but racially they're not Turks, but they speak Turkish. Yeah, but they don't see themselves as Turks. But they want these people pulverized to make them see themselves as Turks. Like how some people now insist that, you have to make a choice, Muslims. Either British or you're Muslim. All right, but we won't go into that yet. Mustafa Kemal, one of the great atheists of his time, refuses to accept even the symbolic status of the Khalifa and has him exiled while he preaches open atheism. The adhan is proclaimed in Turkish, the Arabic alphabet demolished and also declared defunct, and secularism becomes the religion of the state while masjids are closed. Some of the masjids were converted into museums. Can you imagine showing up on Jumu'ah, ready to pray, and the masjid has an opening hours between 6 a.m. and 3 p.m.? What's going on here? One Muslim brother was killed because he refused to wear a chapeau with a bill on it. They asked him, put on this hat. They were making people forcibly wear hats. Put this hat on. He said, but I can't pray if I have that hat on. Shot him. Right? Well, nowadays we think, well, I'll just turn it to the back. But that's not the point, though. The point's not the LA Raiders hat, whether you turn it to the back, or the New York or LA hat. Well, I'll just turn it to the back. Pray in it then. That's not the point. It's what that hat represents, because that Muslim brother, he could have just turned it to the back and gone hip-hop style back then. Maybe he could have. But that's not the point. The point is what it represented. And that's what happened. The country was declared communist, something that's still alive today. It's ruled by a democratic system of military governors. On a lighter note, I wanted to mention to you, the United States finally decided that children should not and cannot be mailed via parcel post. So this was sort of the end of child slavery in the U.S. They realized, mailing those little tykes by parcel post, they'll probably die on the way. It's not a good idea. So they began cracking down on it. I also want to mention this is the same year that the U.S. decided to start cracking down on female circumcisions. This female circumcision was done in the U.S. by Protestant Christians, where they used to have a branding iron and brand the labia minora and labia majora of females, because they believed that because Eve tempted Adam, the fitting punishment for her should be to be deprived of her sexuality, because that was the temptation. Whereas men, obviously nothing's cut or chopped on men, because they're able to control themselves and they are the head of Christ, and the head of Christ is God, while as the head of woman is man, right? And they would quote the book of Galatians that, you've got to watch out, you've got to be quiet and sit down, stay out of the way. And so they would brand, the same brand that they used for making shoes for horses, the same brand they used for branding cattle, same brand that they would use for the labia minora and labia majora. But that's on a lighter note. In 1339 AH, the first birth control clinic was opened in London to test whether people, particularly minorities, could be encouraged to have fewer children and convinced of possible dangers of overcrowding of the planet. So to this day, there'll be people that are saying we're running out of space on the planet. We've got to slow down. There's 6 billion people on this planet. We've got to stop it. People feel very confident. Fortunately, Americans down to 1.1. Rest of the European nations, 1.7, 1.5, 1.2. But it's those Asian fellas. It's those Arabs. And it's those rapidly reproducing fecund Africans. We've got to stop that. We've got to crack down. They're overcrowding the planet. Although only 2% of the world's land is arable for planting for food, and the vast majority of Earth's continents are uninhabited, we're still overcrowding.